The wolf's head tattoo, wrapped around Elena Frost's wrist, had been a constant source of mockery at Glacier Point Research Station. For 8 months, the other researchers would snicker about her edgy teenage mistake, while she maintained their snowmobiles and communication equipment in the brutal Alaskan wilderness. But when expedition leader Dr. Marcus Kane caught sight of that same mark during a routine equipment check, his coffee mug slipped from his frozen fingers and shattered on the ice floor. Without hesitation, he rolled up his thermal sleeve, revealing an identical wolf's head tattooed on his forearm. "She's not maintenance staff," he whispered to his assistant, voice trembling in the -40 air. "She's former Team Fenrir. Only 4 of us survived the avalanche." Before we continue this incredible story, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. What happened next would shake the very foundations of everything the research team thought they knew about the quiet woman who fixed their generators. The wind howled across the desolate Arctic landscape surrounding Glacier Point Research Station, a collection of prefabricated buildings connected by heated walkways that served as humanity's northernmost outpost for climate research. Elena Frost wiped condensation from her safety goggles as she worked on the main generator that kept 30 researchers alive in temperatures that could kill within minutes of exposure. At 29, Elena had perfected the art of invisibility among the station's crew. She arrived each morning at 0600 hours, checked her maintenance log, and disappeared into the mechanical spaces where she could work without interruption. Her colleagues knew her as reliable, competent, and refreshingly drama-free, someone who could diagnose equipment failures with supernatural intuition and never complained about the isolation or brutal conditions. What they didn't know was that Elena Frost had once been someone entirely different. The woman who now spent her days maintaining life support systems had previously operated in places where GPS signals couldn't reach and official records didn't exist. Her transformation from that life to this one had been calculated, necessary, and absolutely essential for her survival. The wolf's head tattoo served as both reminder and burden, a piece of permanent ink connecting her to a past she desperately wanted to forget. To casual observers, it looked like youthful rebellion, perhaps commemorating a favorite animal or sports team. The reality was infinitely more dangerous. Researcher Jake Morrison was first to comment on it. Fresh from his PhD program and excited about his first Arctic assignment, he spotted the tattoo while Elena was reaching into the communication array housing. "Cool ink, Frost," he said with academic smugness. "Looks like prison work, though. Did you lose a bet?" Elena didn't look up from her work, fingers continuing to trace damaged circuits with practiced efficiency. "It's functional," she replied simply, using the flat tone that usually discouraged further conversation. But Morrison was young and hadn't learned to read warning signs that experienced researchers recognized instinctively. "Functional how?" he pressed. "Does it help you fix equipment? Maybe it's like a lucky charm or something?" His comment drew chuckles from other researchers who had gathered to watch the interaction. Their laughter carried the edge of cruelty that academics often displayed when they found an easy target among support staff. The mockery reached Dr. Sarah Chen, who was conducting her daily facility inspection with methodical thoroughness. Chen had been watching Elena work for 8 months, and while she'd noticed the tattoo, she'd also noticed something else, a quality in Elena's movements, controlled precision and constant environmental awareness that spoke of training far beyond equipment maintenance. "Morrison!" Chen barked, her voice cutting through the laughter. "Focus less on Frost's tattoos and more on not breaking expensive equipment." The rebuke scattered the crowd, but Chen caught the brief flash of gratitude in Elena's eyes before she returned to work. As months passed, comments about Elena's tattoo became running jokes among certain researchers. Newcomers would notice it and feel compelled to comment, establishing their place in the station's informal hierarchy. Some suggested she should have it removed. Others speculated about its origins with creative storytelling that flourished in isolated conditions where gossip was primary entertainment. Elena endured it all with stoic patience, having learned that drawing attention to herself was a luxury she couldn't afford. The tattoo was visible, unchangeable, a permanent marker she'd accepted as part of her current existence. Better to let them think it meaningless than reveal what those symbols really represented. The wolf's head wasn't decorative art. It was membership in something that officially didn't exist. Team Fenrir had been created in shadows between military branches, tasked with operations too sensitive for conventional forces. They worked without official backing, without recognition, and without safety nets if things went wrong, and things had gone catastrophically wrong. The memory still visited Elena in pre-dawn hours when the station was quiet. She would lie in her narrow bunk, staring at darkness while her mind replayed that final mission. The sound of helicopter rotors struggling against mountain winds, the weight of equipment designed to slow them down when speed was crucial, the rumble of avalanche triggered by their enemies. 7 people had entered those mountains. Only 4 came out, and 1 hadn't survived extraction. The official story attributed their mission to a training accident in remote Canada. Casualty reports were buried in classified files, and surviving Team Fenrir members were quietly reassigned where they could be monitored and contained. Elena's assignment to Glacier Point had been presented as utilizing her technical skills in a safe environment, while the government decided what to do with someone who knew too much. She understood it was comfortable house arrest, where she could be useful without being dangerous, where her skills contributed, while her knowledge remained safely contained within boundaries where every communication could be monitored. Dr. Marcus Kane arrived at Glacier Point on a Tuesday in November, his presence announced by the administrative flurry accompanying senior researchers. Word spread quickly that they had a new expedition leader with an impressive background in extreme environment operations, specifically requested after completing classified work in Antarctica. Kane was 48, tall and weathered, with the kind of face that spoke of decades in difficult places. His beard was regulation trimmed, indistinguishable from other Arctic researchers. But his eyes held particular watchfulness, suggesting he'd seen more than routine scientific operations. During his second week, while conducting comprehensive facility inspection, Kane first encountered Elena. The inspection was scheduled for 1,400 hours, giving maintenance staff time to prepare work areas for scrutiny. Elena approached it with quiet professionalism, ensuring her area was organized while mentally preparing for questions about equipment schedules and procedures. Kane moved through the station efficiently, stopping at each workstation to examine equipment and ask intelligent questions that impressed staff and put them at ease. When he reached Elena's station, she was replacing the primary heating unit's control system, positioned partially inside the housing, with her arms extended upward. The position left her wrists exposed, and the wolf's head tattoo was clearly visible under harsh LED lighting. Kane stopped walking. For a moment that stretched too long, he simply stood there, eyes fixed on the tattoo with intensity completely at odds with routine inspection. The change in his demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable. Sudden stillness, suggesting he'd seen something that challenged his understanding fundamentally. Dr. Chen, who'd been providing commentary on maintenance procedures, noticed Kane's silence and followed his gaze. "That's Frost, sir," she said, assuming his attention was caught by Elena's positioning. "One of our best technicians. She's got instinct for diagnosing problems I've never seen matched." Kane didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, movement careful and deliberate in ways suggesting he was processing information beyond routine protocols. When he spoke, his voice carried quality that hadn't been present during inspection, careful neutrality, somehow conveying both authority and uncertainty. "Frost," he said, and something in pronunciation made Elena freeze mid-task. "Could you step out from there for a moment?" The request was polite, but carried unmistakable weight of direct order. Elena carefully set down tools and emerged from the housing, coming to attention with automatic precision drilled into military personnel. Her eyes met Kane's briefly before shifting to regulation position above his shoulder, but that moment was enough to confirm what he'd begun suspecting. "At ease," Kane said, though his posture remained rigid with tension from recognizing a face from classified briefings in buildings that didn't officially exist. His gaze shifted to her wrist where the tattoo was clearly visible, and for seconds the station filled with uncomfortable silence. Chen cleared her throat, sensing something significant, but unable to understand what. "Sir, is there something about Frost's work you'd like to discuss? Her performance reports have been exemplary." Kane seemed to remember where he was, though his eyes never left the tattoo. "What's the significance of that tattoo, Frost?" he asked, voice carefully controlled, suggesting the answer was far more important than casual questioning indicated. Elena felt her heart rate increase while maintaining neutral expression. This was the moment she'd dreaded, inevitable confrontation with someone who might recognize what she carried. She'd hoped it would never come, that she could complete unofficial exile anonymously. "It's personal, sir," she replied, using the kind of answer that was technically truthful while revealing nothing. A reminder of past experiences. Kane studied her face intensely, trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. Recognition was in his eyes, but also confusion, as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with someone he'd known in completely different context. "Past experiences," he repeated, tone making clear he understood exactly what she meant. His gaze shifted to Chen and other technicians watching with growing curiosity, and Elena could see him calculating risks of continuing this conversation before witnesses lacking necessary clearance. Without another word, Kane began removing his parka, movements deliberate and purposeful. The coat came off smoothly, revealing thermal underlayers. Then he pulled up his sleeve, exposing his forearm to shocked stares. On his left arm, rendered in identical faded ink, was the same wolf's head tattoo. Silence was absolute, broken only by distant sounds of station operations. Chen's mouth opened without producing sound, while other technicians stared in bewilderment at their leader's revelation. Kane's eyes never left Elena's face as he stood there with his tattoo visible. When he spoke, voice was barely above whisper, but every word carried weight of shared experience. "She's not maintenance staff," he said to Chen while looking directly at Elena. "She's former Team Fenrir. Only 4 of us survived." The words hung like smoke, carrying implications witnesses couldn't understand, but sensed were profoundly significant. Elena felt something tighten in her chest, combination of relief and terror from having her cover blown by someone who'd shared the same nightmare. Kane slowly covered his tattoo, regaining composure while brief vulnerability passed. When fully dressed, he turned to Chen with authoritative bearing. "I need to speak with Frost privately. The rest of you continue duties, and understand that what happened here doesn't leave this station." Chen nodded quickly, confusion evident, but obedience absolute. "You heard, Dr. Kane. Back to work, and keep quiet about what you saw." Staff dispersed with reluctant efficiency, casting curious glances as they returned to stations. Kane waited for relative privacy before speaking, voice low enough to avoid being overheard. "We need to talk," he said simply. Elena nodded, understanding their conversation would fundamentally alter the equilibrium she'd maintained for 8 months. "Your office, sir? There's a secure room where we can speak freely. Meet me at Lab 7 in 30 minutes. Come alone." Lab 7 was in a restricted section Elena had never accessed during her time at Glacier Point. Kane was waiting in a windowless room notable for lack of standard monitoring equipment and presence of electronics, suggesting regular sweeps for surveillance devices. "Close the door," Kane said as she entered. Elena complied before sitting across from him. For moments, neither spoke, both struggling with recognition's weight. Finally, Kane broke silence. "I thought you were dead." After-action report said only 3 survivors from extraction. Your name wasn't on any lists. Elena nodded slowly. "Officially, I am dead. Elena Frost is dead. The woman you knew in Team Fenrir was someone else, and she died in those mountains with Rodriguez and Park." Mention of fallen teammates brought memorial silence. Kane's expression darkened, with memories clearly still painful, and Elena saw he carried survivor's guilt from walking away when others hadn't. "What happened after extraction?" Kane asked gently, but insistently. "I was given a choice," Elena explained carefully. "Reassignment to position where my knowledge could be contained, or face permanent solutions to what I knew." Kane nodded grimly. "I chose reassignment too, though my path back was more direct. They couldn't make me expedition leader overnight without questions, so they made me a technician instead." "You're wasted here," Kane said, frustration evident. "Skills you demonstrated in Fenrir, tactical knowledge, operational experience, all squandered on routine maintenance." Elena leaned back, studying Kane carefully. "That's exactly the point. I'm not supposed to use those skills. I'm supposed to be contained, where I can't embarrass people who decided Team Fenrir was too much liability." Bitterness was unmistakable, reflecting years of accepting that her service had been deemed inconvenient by people who'd never faced dangers she'd willingly accepted. Kane seemed to recognize that bitterness. "How much do you know about why I'm here? About my assignment to Glacier Point?" "Nothing beyond standard briefings. Impressive background, classified Antarctic work, the usual credentials." Kane smiled humorlessly. "I didn't request this assignment. It was given to me, just like your assignment was given to you. The difference is my orders came with additional responsibilities beyond standard expedition leadership." Elena felt familiar tension building, alertness that had served her in hostile environments. "What kind of responsibilities?" Keeping track of former Team Fenrir personnel, Kane replied, words carrying implications both reassuring and disturbing. "There are 4 of us scattered across different assignments. My job is monitoring our welfare and ensuring successful adjustment. And if we're not adjusting successfully, then other arrangements would be made," Kane said simply, confirming her fears with bureaucratic language, describing final and irreversible decisions. "So you're here to watch me?" "Among other things," Kane confirmed. "Though I'm relieved to discover you're adjusting as well as you appear. Your reports have been exemplary, with no indication of difficulty transitioning. Because I've been careful to give exactly that impression, Elena replied. I understood from the beginning that survival depended on convincing people I was no longer a threat. Kane leaned forward intensely. But that's not entirely true, is it? You are still a threat, just carefully contained. Skills learned in Fenrir don't disappear, because you're working on generators instead of classified operations. No, they don't disappear, but I've become good at pretending they don't exist. The question is, Kane said, voice dropping to whisper, what happens when circumstances require those skills again? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Elena understood Kane wasn't asking, hypothetically, something specific related to her situation and his presence. What circumstances? She asked. Kane was quiet, seeming to weigh words carefully. Intelligence suggests someone is taking interest in former Team Fenrir personnel. Not official interest, someone else. Someone with resources and motivation to track down people involved in operations that officially never happened. Elena felt blood turn to ice. Who? We don't know yet. Intelligence is fragmentary, mostly inquiry patterns, analysts have noticed. Someone's been asking questions about Team Fenrir, specific operations, personnel involved in classified activities during our operational timeframe. Elena processed this with analytical mindset that had once made her invaluable when incomplete intelligence had to become actionable plans. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, possibly longer. Patterns only became apparent when analysts began connecting previously unrelated data points. That's when the decision was made to place former Fenrir personnel under closer observation. Which explains your assignment here. Kane nodded grimly. That's part of it. But if this escalates, if whoever's behind these inquiries makes a move, we may need to respond with capabilities beyond conventional security. Elena understood immediately what he suggested, and the prospect filled her with anticipation and dread she hadn't experienced since leaving Team Fenrir. You're talking about reactivating operational capabilities. I'm talking about defending ourselves, using skills we haven't officially possessed for years. Kane corrected, though distinction was semantic. Hope is this resolves through conventional channels, but we need to be prepared. Their conversation continued with Kane providing details about intelligence patterns triggering concern at command levels. The picture was troubling but incomplete. Someone with significant resources was systematically investigating Team Fenrir for unclear reasons. As they talked, Elena found herself returning to analytical mindset that had been second nature, evaluating threats and considering responses with professional detachment that had made her effective when emotional reactions could prove fatal. When Kane indicated their meeting was concluded, Elena felt like she was emerging from a different world, where stakes were measured in survival rather than equipment schedules. Transition back to cover identity felt jarring. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait, Kane replied. You continue maintenance duties, I continue as expedition leader. We maintain covers and watch for signs of escalation. If something changes, I'll contact you through secure channels. And if our covers are blown? Kane's expression was grim but determined. Then we remind them why Team Fenrir was considered so effective it had to be disbanded rather than reassigned. They left separately. Kane first while Elena waited before following into Arctic afternoon. The station continued normal operations, and on surface nothing had changed from morning when her biggest concern was replacing heating control systems. But underneath that normalcy, everything was different. The equilibrium she'd maintained for 8 months had been shattered by recognition in Kane's eyes and information about threats gathering in shadows beyond Glacier Point's relative safety. She was no longer simply Elena Frost, maintenance technician, trying to avoid notice. She was former Team Fenrir, with all dangers and responsibilities that identity carried. That evening, alone in quarters, Elena found herself staring at the tattoo with new eyes. For 8 months, it had been a burden, visible reminder of past she was trying to forget. Now it had become something else. Signal that identified her to someone sharing the same dangerous history. She traced the wolf's outline with her fingertip, remembering the night she'd received it in a tent during their first mission briefing. Part of ritual binding her to 3 other people in ways transcending normal military service. They'd been a team, family, united by shared dangers and mutual trust, where margin for error was measured in heartbeats. One was dead now. 2 others scattered to different lives, different identities supposed to keep them safe from consequences of what they'd done. Now Kane was telling her that safety might be illusion, that someone was actively hunting them for unclear reasons. The prospect should have terrified her, But instead, she experienced something closer to relief. For 8 months, she'd been living a lie, pretending to be someone she wasn't, suppressing instincts and abilities that once defined her existence. The possibility of returning to that world, even under dangerous circumstances, carried appeal she found both disturbing and undeniable. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams blending memories of past operations with anxieties about future threats. She found herself reliving moments from that final mission that cost them Rodriguez and effectively ended Team Fenrir. Details were vivid. Sound of rotors struggling against thin air, weight of equipment, faces of contacts who promised support but delivered betrayal. She woke before dawn, as had become habit, and lay in darkness, listening to sounds of research station preparing for another day. The routine felt different now, charged with awareness that had once been essential for survival. She found herself checking sightlines, noting potential exits, evaluating defensive capabilities of structures she'd previously regarded as functional buildings. 2 days later, while conducting routine maintenance on the communication array, Elena noticed the man who didn't belong. He was dressed in Arctic gear, slightly too new, positioned where he could observe the station while appearing to conduct routine survey work. His equipment suggested access to resources beyond casual observation. More importantly, he was watching her specifically. The surveillance was professional, sophisticated enough that most wouldn't notice, but Elena's training included extensive counter-surveillance, and she recognized subtle signs of systematic observation. His position allowed monitoring her work area, while appearing focused on his own tasks. Elena continued maintenance at normal pace, giving no indication she'd detected surveillance while using reflective surfaces to gather information. He appeared alone, though that didn't mean he was operating without support. She chose to contact Kane, finishing her work before disposing of tools and leaving the array through the main entrance. The man didn't follow immediately, but she caught him speaking into what appeared to be a satellite phone, confirming her suspicion he was part of larger surveillance operation. 20 minutes later, she was in Kane's secure room. "We have a problem," Kane said without preamble when she reported the surveillance. "Intelligence intercepted communications, suggesting someone is preparing direct action against former Team Fenrir personnel." Elena felt her stomach tighten with anticipatory dread. What kind of direct action? Fragmentary intelligence suggests someone has compiled detailed profiles of all surviving members, including current assignments, cover identities, and operational capabilities. Communications indicate these profiles are being distributed to operational teams. Operational teams belonging to whom? That's the problem. We don't know. Communications were encrypted using methods suggesting significant sophistication. Language patterns indicate professional intelligence training. No clear indication whether this is government, private intelligence, or something else. Elena processed this with analytical detachment that had served her in situations where emotional reactions could prove fatal. "How compromised is my cover?" "Completely," Kane replied bluntly. "Profiles include detailed information about your assignment, living arrangements, daily routines, everything someone would need to locate and target you." The news should have been devastating, but Elena experienced something closer to relief. Uncertainty characterizing her situation for 8 months was finally resolved, replaced by clear and immediate danger she was trained to handle. What about the other survivors? Martinez is at McMurdo Station in Antarctica, working communications. Thompson is assigned to Arctic research in Greenland. Both covers similarly compromised, and were implementing protective measures as of this morning. Kane paused, weighing words carefully. Problem is, conventional protective measures may not be sufficient. If these operational teams are staffed by professional intelligence personnel, they'll be prepared for standard security protocols. Elena understood immediately. "You're talking about proactive measures." "I'm talking about taking offensive action against whoever's targeting us," Kane confirmed. "We can't hide and hope threats go away when opponents have resources matching our own." The prospect of returning to active operations filled Elena with complex mixture of anticipation and apprehension she hadn't experienced since leaving Team Fenrir. Skills she'd spent 8 months suppressing suddenly seemed vitally relevant again. What kind of offensive action? "The kind Team Fenrir was created to handle," Kane replied. "Targets conventional forces can't touch. Operations requiring capabilities beyond regular units. Missions that officially don't exist, but are essential for protecting American interests." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Team Fenrir had been disbanded because operations became too politically sensitive. Now those same capabilities were needed to protect former members from threats conventional resources couldn't address. Kane opened a locked drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope, placing it between them. Preliminary operational parameters compiled by people who understand what Fenrir was capable of. Contents are classified at levels that officially don't exist. Reading them constitutes acceptance of operational responsibility under undefined conditions. Elena stared at the envelope, understanding opening it would represent point of no return in transition back to active status. The woman who'd spent 8 months fixing generators would cease to exist, replaced by someone once considered among the most dangerous individuals in American intelligence. The choice should have been difficult, but it wasn't. The moment Kane had revealed his tattoo, her old life had effectively ended, and her original identity had begun reasserting itself. The prospect of returning to work, utilizing her full capabilities, was more appealing than continuing to suppress her nature for anonymity that had already been compromised. She reached for the envelope. The documents inside painted a picture of threats both immediate and sophisticated. Targeting profiles compiled on former Team Fenrir personnel were remarkably comprehensive, suggesting access to classified databases and surveillance capabilities exceeding most government agencies. More disturbing was evidence of coordination between multiple operational teams, indicating systematic campaign using methods suggesting both professional capabilities and personal motivation. Any theories about who's behind this? Elena asked after reviewing documents. Several, none comforting, Kane replied. Could be foreign intelligence seeking revenge for operations that damaged their interests. Could be private organization connected to people we targeted. Could even be elements within our own government who decided loose ends needed permanent resolution. The last possibility was most disturbing, suggesting people who once directed Fenrir operations might now consider former members' liabilities, requiring elimination. Their conversation was interrupted by Kane's secure phone, emitting distinctive tone indicating classified communications. Kane answered, voice taking formal tone, suggesting he was speaking with significant authority. Yes, sir, he said after listening. Understood. We'll be ready to implement immediately. When he hung up, expression was grim but determined. Confirmation that hostile operational teams are moving against Fenrir survivors. Martinez's station in Antarctica was under surveillance this morning, and Thompson's routine in Greenland has been mapped by people preparing for direct action. Elena felt pulse quicken, with familiar combination of anticipation and apprehension. And authorization for proactive measures? Pending, but expected within hours, Kane replied. Meanwhile, we're authorized to implement immediate protective measures and begin operational preparations. The transformation from maintenance technician to active operative felt surreal but natural, as if she was finally returning to identity that had always been her true self. Skills that had been dormant began reasserting themselves with increasing intensity. Tactical awareness, replacing comfortable maintenance routines. Operational planning, displacing concerns about equipment schedules. What about our covers here? Already handled, Kane replied. As of this afternoon, you're temporarily assigned to classified research, requiring you to be unavailable for routine maintenance. Staff has been told you're participating in sensitive environmental monitoring. The efficiency with which her transition had been arranged indicated preparations had been ongoing, suggesting threats against Fenrir survivors had been anticipated at levels above her clearance. Kane stood. Movement signaling briefing was concluded, and preparations beginning. There's a secure facility where we can prepare without exposure to surveillance. I'll take you there now. The facility was located in sections of Glacier Point Elena had never seen, areas clearly restricted to personnel with special clearances. The main operations room was equipped with communications, tactical displays, and computer systems, suggesting access to intelligence resources across the American security establishment. Welcome back to officially non-existent operations, Kane said as they entered. I know it's been 8 months since you've worked in this environment, but essential requirements haven't changed. Elena surveyed the room with professional assessment that had once been automatic, noting capabilities while beginning to think in terms of mission parameters and operational objectives. Transition from cover identity felt complete now, as if the woman who'd spent 8 months fixing generators had been revealed as elaborate disguise no longer necessary. Several hours were spent reviewing intelligence reports and preliminary operational plans, painting comprehensive picture of dangers facing Fenrir survivors and resources available to address threats. Scope of hostile operation was broader than initially realized, involving multiple teams operating internationally, with coordination suggesting significant organizational capabilities and financial resources. More disturbing was evidence their opponents possessed detailed knowledge of Team Fenrir methods and capabilities, suggesting either access to classified files or information from someone with intimate knowledge of the unit's history. As evening approached, Kane received the communication they'd been waiting for. Authorization for proactive operations had been approved, with parameters essentially restoring Team Fenrir to active status for current crisis duration. "So we're officially operational again?" Elena asked. "As official as Team Fenrir ever was," Kane replied with bitter smile. "Which means if something goes wrong, we'll be disavowed as quickly as we're being reactivated." The familiar pattern of official support with plausible deniability was exactly what Elena expected, but still carried betrayal's sting, reminding her why she'd accepted exile to maintenance duty rather than continue serving, where loyalty was luxury political considerations couldn't afford. But now she was back, whether by choice or necessity, and skills that made her valuable to Fenrir were essential for survival again. The woman who'd spent 8 months pretending to be someone else was gone, replaced by someone understanding the only way to protect the life she'd built was to temporarily abandon it for capabilities she'd hoped never to use again. As Kane outlined preliminary operational parameters for their response to threats against Fenrir survivors, Elena felt last vestiges of her cover identity fade, replaced by cold professional competence that had once made her among the most feared operatives in American intelligence. The maintenance technician was gone, and in her place stood someone who understood that ensuring future safety required eliminating threats that had forced her back into a world she'd tried to leave behind. The wolf's head tattoo had always represented the predatory nature of her true identity, the way attempts to escape her past inevitably led back to the same dangerous realities that had shaped her. Now, as she prepared to return to active operations under circumstances both familiar and entirely new, she understood the wolf wasn't just decorative symbolism. It was a reminder that no matter how far she traveled from her origins, she would always be a predator when survival demanded she abandon pretense for lethal competence. The mission ahead would determine whether that return represented salvation or destruction. But either way, Elena Frost, the maintenance technician, was gone forever, replaced by someone whose existence was carefully maintained fiction, designed to protect secrets too dangerous for acknowledgement. The woman who'd once moved through shadows in places most people couldn't pronounce was back. And this time, there would be no research station to hide in when the mission was complete.